'cause a day without you in my life, I don't know how to mend. And I was like, eh, 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 oh, 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 oh. You were like, eh, 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 no, oh, no, oh. I was like, eh, 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 oh, 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 oh. You were like, eh, 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 no, oh, no, oh. Come on, let's rewind till I smile. That look upon your face. My heart is empty and unguided. I'm blind leading chase. I thought I had a plan with you and me. Was the villain of my own dream, breaking me down to my knees. I look right at the mirror, wondering if I'll be okay. My head is telling me nothing, it's got nothing left to say. And I was like, eh, 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 oh, 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 oh. You were like, eh, 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 no, oh, no, oh. I was like, eh, 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 oh, 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 oh. You were like, eh, 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 no, oh, no, oh. Come on, let's rewind till I smile. That look upon your face. My heart is empty and unguided. I'm blind leading chase. I thought I had a plan with you and me. Was the villain of my own dream, breaking me down to my knees.
Hello, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Time Lapse. My name is Veewake, and with me is a very, very special guest. It's been a long year of the Dota Pro circuit, but finally, TI Open qualifiers are upon us. New teams are being formed, some teams are being disbanded, but a lot of prep work. And I think the most important element of the TI Open qualifiers is a coach. With me is the coach of Entity Gaming, Anthony Scantzor Hodgson. How's it going, Scantzor?
It's going all right. I mean, I don't know if I agree with you. The most important elements as a coach, obviously the players are going to do the playing. Once the game starts, there's that. But I do agree that coaches are important.
I think coaches are very underrated, and it's very hard to measure the impact of a coach. I mean, like the only thing you can look at is results to some extent, but that's limited, but partly correct as well.
Oh yeah, I agree. Like to know the impact of a coach inside a team is very, very difficult without seeing it firsthand. Usually all you can do is ask the players that have been involved in the coach's work, but even then it's like people are going to have their own biases and perceptions. So
right.
There's room for coaches to do a lot. I can tell you, for example, with Entity that I've been working with now for the last week, I've been able to identify a lot of space where I could make a positive impact. I won't say that I've been able to figure out exactly how to do it, but let's say I've been able to identify which things would be helpful to this team for me to help them with, if I can figure out how exactly to help them with those things.
Okay. Guys, there will be some sort of technical hiccups because Scantzor is live from Manila from the bootcamp, and I mean, anybody who's ever been to the Philippines will tell you that the boot camp in Manila is not a quiet place. So you might hear Job just raging in his matchmaking. You might hear Noya and Heshte walk by. But we'll keep it homely and we'll just go with the flow. I've also lost my spectacles. So I literally got somebody just sitting next to me so that they can read out questions from the audience, which we will be taking towards the end of this podcast. But Scantzor, I mean, you've been coaching for a while. If I'm not mistaken, since the Boston Major?
My first coaching job was for South African team, which was a little bit before that.
Okay.
So about 3 months before the Boston Major, I coached the South African team, which was in our local scene was quite a big deal at the time because there's one team called Bravado Gaming, which I used to play for a long time, and it was the best Dota team for about 3-4 years. And I retired from playing for the team and went to coach the opposition actually, there's quite a lot of drama about it. And then the opposition team that I coached, they actually won and became the new top team. And then immediately after that, I moved to Manila and started coaching Mineski for the Boston Major. We did quite well. We qualified for a few lands. We didn't qualify for the Boston Major. We ended up coming third in that one. But we were like, it was one of those things where, in hindsight, I think I'll always feel like it was a missed opportunity because the whole Boston Major qualifier, Mineski and Faceless were the top two teams. And then right towards the end, we had a bit of a hit. We got tilted pretty hard by a match and ended up losing to WG Unity. Following Mineski, I went back home. I came back, and then I was coaching Happy Feet in Manila last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then after my work with Happy Feet finished last year, I went back home and I went back into events, which I'd done before in the past, casting, analysis, that kind of stuff. And now here I am again for my third time in Manila for coaching this time entity, as you know.
Okay. I guess the immediate goal with entity is, I think, going to regionals and then eventually obviously securing a slot at TI, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing at a time. Opens, then regionals, then TI. But you don't want to get ahead of yourself. Right now, the goal is opens.
Okay. And the goals opens, I'm going to start with that. I think the open qualifiers are one of the most it is, in my opinion, the most grueling format. Everything's a best of one until the final or the semi-finals. It varies usually from tournament to tournament, if I'm not mistaken. But with finals
should be till the semis. I think it'll be till the semis.
Okay, so semis turn into best of threes or whatever. I think we got registrations. There are a slot for 1,000+ teams. A lot of teams are registered. How do you prepare for what is largely best of one? And then you obviously get your break for your best of three. But how do you approach the best of one format?
It's very hard. It's very, very hard. I don't know. Honestly, you have heard that there's a movement in Dota in general when it comes to majors and minors. The pro players have been campaigning to get best of ones removed. Eternal Envy especially has been very vocal about it. Right. Best of ones is a totally different kind of Dota, because when you play a series, you get to adjust, you get to adapt to what the team is doing, what the dynamic was in the previous match. It's a very different thing to a best of one. And it's scary, I gotta tell you. We've been playing a lot of scrims, and there's this kind of joke because our team keeps going 1-1. Scrims are generally best of two. And I think almost all of our scrims are 1-1. And 1-1 is when you're preparing for a qualifier, which is best of threes, 1-1 consistently is a pretty good result because it's you're unbeaten. No one's beating you and you're learning things along the way. But if you're preparing for open qualifier, going 1-1 all the time, that's not going to get you anywhere in an open qualifier. You need to be able to not drop any games at all. Mm-hmm. So I don't to be honest, we haven't put a lot of emphasis on that because we don't have any control over that. We're preparing as though we'd be preparing for anything, and what we're trying to figure out is how can we become a better team. We've identified a few issues. I can tell you, the primary concern in our team is that we don't have a natural shot caller. And I'm busy trying to figure out a way to see if we can create one or create a hybrid shot calling system, or because there's just our strategies are good enough, I would say. Our play skill is easily good enough, but we get lost sometimes in the middle of games because we don't have a clear shot calling system. And so honestly, that's what I've been focusing all of my time on at the moment. And that's what I'll probably be doing after this chat finishes, what I'll probably be doing tomorrow, what I'll probably be doing the next day. Just figuring out a way that we can communicate with each other more effectively and more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. I think you said two things that I've spoken to a lot of CSGO coaches, and they both emphasize the exact same things that you say. One, it's about looking inward and working on our game, and obviously studying the opposition to some extent. But the second thing is, the second thing that you mentioned is communication. And I think Heshte or Noya just walked in. But I think the second thing that you mentioned is how there's a lack of communication within the team. Not a lack, but a more solid focus in the communication. And
communication is such a complicated and important thing. I mean, this is not limited to Dota or Counter-Strike or esports. So it's the same in sports. It's the same in any work environment which involves working in a team. To have an effective communication dynamic is going to improve the results and improve the productivity and the speed at which you can get things done. Mm-hmm. And our team doesn't necessarily have a problem with, you get teams that have a problem with people just not speaking. And that's obviously fundamentally a communication issue. Everyone on our team actually speaks, but we're trying to figure out the most effective way to use that communication, what kinds of things which people should be saying when. That's the puzzle we're busy trying to solve right now.
Okay. And do you tend to just hang around on Discord with your team when they scrim just to look at what the communication sounds like in game? Do you do that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the two things I'm mostly doing right now. I'm actually drafting for the team right now, so there's that. And then once the game starts, I kind of just sit and watch them play and listen to them talk to each other, and every now and then try and note if someone was saying something in a tone which wasn't constructive, or if someone was focusing on the wrong thing, or if a particular person needed to be saying something and wasn't saying it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something. You said you're drafting for the team. Is it just you doing the draft all by yourself, or is there any input from the players? Any reason why you took over? Did you feel that the team needed to reevaluate its approach to these drafts? Or
They actually asked me to. I mean, it was the first thing they asked me when they discussed hiring me as a coach. The first thing we discussed was whether or not I'd be able to draft because they felt like they weren't confident in their own drafting at that time. Sorry, Hester just came in.
Yeah.
So that's but it is a team initiative. It's not like I'm not doing it all on my own, sucking out of my thumb. It's very much I mean, my philosophy as a coach is that my job is to help the players get the most out of one another. And so a lot of what I'm doing is trying to like utilize the information that they've got, but put it together into a coherent system. So it's not just like my ideas. I've got overall ideas that try and put that stuff together, but I consult them on a lot of the stuff that goes into the picks.
Okay. So I mean, do you coach multiple teams? Do you have one approach that works for all teams, or have you tended to come up with different approaches for different teams when you coach them?
No, it depends. I mean, it might be useful if I come up with one approach at some stage, but it depends on so much. It depends on how Dota is. Depends on what the dynamic in that team is. Depends on like the maturity of the people, how fluent they are in English. When I coached Happy Feet, like the team was really not fluent at all in English compared to Mineski. People did speak English over here. People are speaking English. So it impacts really what happened, for example, in Happy Feet is that I ended up giving mostly strategic input. I couldn't usually comment that much on the communication, whereas in Mineski, I was much more of like a person who was there to improve the team dynamic, the team communication, the discussions, make sure that the post-match discussions are much more productive. And I've sort of pivoted back to a bit of that, I think, over here, even though I am doing the drafting. As I said, that's kind of like a team thing as well.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess coaching is still sufficiently new in Dota, and I'm still sufficiently new to coaching that I haven't come up with like a one fits all sizes approach.
Okay. I think one of the things we spoke of at the beginning was how much of an impact does a coach really have, and that's often very hard to quantify. In your eyes, do you think? I mean, of course, every big team has a coach. You got Sunby, you got Heen, you got Bulba, you got all these coaches. I'm sure there's some secret coach Discord, or maybe there isn't. But in your eyes, who have been some of the most crucial or impactful coaches according to you? Because I'm sure you have a little bit of an insider perspective to this.
That's an interesting question. I would say that my understanding is that a lot of the Chinese coaches are drafting for their teams, and not just drafting like with inputs, but drafting like outright drafting for their teams. Mm-hmm. And obviously those ones are having a very big impact. I don't know they're seeing that directly.
But 1 second, you said those ones don't have a very big impact, or you don't know how big that impact is?
No, they do have they clearly must have a very big impact if they're unilaterally drafting for their teams. That's right. That's a measurable. Right? Sorry?
It's just 71 who does that, right? I mean...
No. It's a lot of the Chinese teams. Mikasa's doing that.
Which team does
Mikasa's for Vici. Okay. I think Vici and Vici J and LGD all have coaches who draft for them. And they don't even like consult the players. They just... It's a very popular approach in China, and I think it's catching on more and more. 71's done that as well for Mineski, but like, again, he's Chinese. So it's... Whereas in the West, there's... Like, to be honest, I think it's a very uncommon thing in the West. I know EG used Belbert to coach for them at the one LAN I went to recently to actually do the drafting. But usually Western teams don't have coaches do the drafting for them. It's usually much more of a consulting role.
Okay.
In that sense, I think that Mad had a very big impact on OG. I think OG, when they were winning all those majors, like, owed a lot to him for that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Belbert, TI winning coach, like, for very good reason. Those are the easy choices. Kips, I think, is not talked about enough. I definitely, out of all the coaches that I know, I think people doubt her because she doesn't have like player credentials. But what she does have is, I think she works harder than anyone. absolutely anyone. I think she works harder than the players in her teams. I think she works harder than other coaches. I think she's like one of the top hardest working people in our whole industry.
She was Fnatic's coach when Ohio was back there with Mushi, right?
Yeah, she coached Fnatic, she coached TNC, and now she's at Vegas Squadron.
Okay. Okay. Um. So your list is Kips, Bulba, and I forgot the third name. Damn. Kips, Bulba,
And effing mad.
and effing Matt. Sorry, effing Matt. When OG were in their prime, and obviously the Chinese coaches, who you feel have a huge impact just because.
But I mean, the thing is, it's actually like, kind of like what we said, you actually don't know. And you think because it's true, like I have personal relationships and personal dealings with a lot of these people, but really to know the impact of a coach on a team, you need to be able to observe that coach with that team. You need to be able to, ultimately you'd have to observe the team without the coach and then the team with the coach and then the team after the coach. It's a lot. I can't even tell you right now what my impact on this team is. You know,
Right.
it's not obvious.
Right, and which is exactly why I wanted to have a word with you and talk to you, because coaches are so, I mean, they're there, they're important, their impact can't be measured, and only if we like do really spend time, and even when I end up spending time with you like this, I'm probably not going to be able to gauge your impact. It's like you said, I've got to observe entity before without a coach, and then with the coach, and then obviously what kind of success they have with the coach. You spoke of Kips, and you said that she might not have had the player credentials. I think in traditional sport, you don't have to have been the most mechanically gifted soccer player to have coached a good team or to have been a good coach. Do you think there are any basic credentials that a coach in Dota 2 has to hit before he or she can be considered being a coach?
I mean, you just like, there's so many different ways that a coach can bring value in Dota. And I think that you have to be able to justify your presence in bringing at least, some kind of value. It depends which kind. And the thing about mechanical skill is actually complicated when it comes to Dota. And I'm someone who's kind of in the middle. I'm someone who's always played in the sort of 5K MMR range, like usually high 5K, but currently kind of low 5K. So hopefully we'll change that tomorrow. The thing is that if you don't play, there's sort of like there's concepts in Dota that are harder to understand that you actually pick up as you get to higher play skill. It's like the vocabulary isn't even there for you, and you don't see what you don't see because you haven't played at that level yet. And so I think that if you're not a mechanically skilled, if you're not a high MMR player who's played at that level, you do need to lean on people who have. You need to have the skill to be able to like ask the right questions of the players. I think the thing that's been very important to me every single time I've coached a team is I've started off with a conversation saying, look, I'm not going to tell you how to win your lane because I'm not that kind of coach, right? I'm not better at laning than you are. You're like a 7K MMR player and I'm a 5K MMR player. So when you make a decision in your lane that I don't understand, I'm going to ask you about why you did it and why it made sense, and that'll help me learn, and then I can reapply that knowledge to other areas of what we're doing, right? So it's kind of like it's a process that goes both ways. The players can learn things from me, but I can learn things from them too. And what you'll find actually, which is I think the most interesting thing of all, is that asking people questions about why they do things helps them to understand those things better as well. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of Dota players do things on feel. They don't know why they make decisions they make. It feels right because they've played lots and they've developed instincts which are reliable in the game. And so if you ask someone to explain themselves, it forces them to think about why they're doing something. Then when they think about it, they give the reason, they actually start to understand the pattern behind it better.
Okay.
So yeah, the short answer is that I think you need to be willing. You need to be willing to fill those gaps in your knowledge by like asking and talking and engaging.
I think another thing that I wanted to ask you is, you said that it's a BO1. Right now, your approach to working towards that BO1 is fixing problems within the team. But are you preparing in any sense by coming up with what I would call a pocket strat or anything to bail you out of that one clutch BO1? Are you looking at options? No.
No, I don't. To be honest, like there's a like an endless debate that goes on in the professional Dota analyst community about these things, and some people think that BO1s are about pocket strategies, and I'm of the view that it's the opposite. I think that what's better in a BO1 is to be stable. I think that, like, if you think about it this way, if everyone just comes with a bunch of pocket strategies, and you've got like 8 best of ones in a row, like yours is going to match up badly against someone else's at some stage. You're just going to lose. Like, you want to have as stable as possible strategy in a BO1. Like, I would rather have a pocket strategy for BO3, in fact.
Okay, and fair enough. Have you looked at including or widening the player hero pool in any sense? Because I mean, forget pocket strats, but you want to have some flexibility as to heroes that you can pick, right? So maybe you wanted certain options with this team which weren't available earlier, and you're like, guys, I think we need to start working with these heroes in our pub so that eventually we can incorporate them into our competitive matches.
Yeah, we've tried. I got to tell you, it's been hard. This has been probably the main challenge actually, is that as you may or may not know, Black's actually at the Super Major right now, working as an analyst. And so a substantial amount of the scrim time that we've had since I've arrived has been without him. We're playing with a stand-in. But our stand-in is not the same style of player as Black. And so we've had to like think, are we drafting to the strengths of the person playing with us right now, to the strengths of the person who will play with us in the actual qualifier? Are we going to go somewhere in between? It's quite hard to select your heroes when you're not playing with your... Basically, it's just very, very suboptimal to prepare for an event using a stand-in. Like, that's something that no one would ever really want to be doing. So yes, to some extent, there have been heroes that I've wanted to get us on, and we've been trying some of them, and some of them have fit in, and some of them have been rejected. But we're getting to a point where I think tomorrow is the last day where we try new things, was the decision that I made, because after tomorrow, it's about 1 week left to the qualifiers, and I wanted to have that 1 week of, we know that this player has these, I don't know, handful of heroes, this player has these handful of heroes, and then we're just refining, because like I said, for me, it's about having a stable and consistent system. That's what's going to optimize our chances in the best of ones, not having a whole bunch of wild ideas.
Okay. I've noticed, or I've at least noticed this in 3 teams. Entity, when they were playing without Black, with the player before them. I'm not sure which qualifier this was, but I followed them through 2 open qualifiers, followed the entire journey until the finals. And I've also noticed this in an Indian team, that for the entire run of the open qualifiers, at best you see a variance of 3 heroes for every player. Is there any reason that a team plays with such a small pool for an event? Because I've seen teams do this. I'm not quite sure why, but I've seen them do this. Do you have any insight as to why teams do this?
I mean, it's like, if you think about it, it's like, why wouldn't you just keep doing your best drafts over and over? Like, in a best of 3, you're forced to adjust because your opponent adjusts, and like a lot of the time you're worried that you're not going to win with the same thing twice. Like, they're going to know how to deal with it. Best of 1, the person doesn't get to adjust, right? So I think it just makes sense that you keep doing your best things over and over and over.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I think it was the Super Major qualifier where Entity played Tusk almost every game on Noya, and I more or less remember those heroes, but they did find success with them. I mean, I'm not doubting that way of approaching an open qualifier. I just wanted to understand what's the thought process like when teams tend to do this. I think another thing that I'd like to talk to you about is, I mean, you're from South Africa. What is South African Dota like? I'm sure everybody asks us, like, what's Indian Dota like? I'm equally curious about South African Dota. What's the scene like?
I mean, there's not a big enough number of fans. Like, there's probably more money in the scene than what people would expect. There's the top gaming organization in South Africa, Bravado Gaming, has a big sponsorship deal with Alienware. In fact, their Counter-Strike team is currently boot camping in North America for the 6 months. They don't have a Dota.
Oh.
There's a lot of Dota teams. Bravado, the top team, have dropped their Dota team recently just because there weren't a lot of events this year, and because 2 of their players moved abroad. And myself, I was kind of like, I've got this kind of like, I don't know, I guess you could say godfather status in the South African Dota scene, because I played for the longest time. I played since 2003. So Dota 1, Dota 2, everything. And I was kind of, I worked my way up, and once I got to the top, I stayed at the top for a very long time. The team that I captained was at the top for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. And what I've done recently is I've been pushing South Africans to leave. I've been telling them, if you want to be a serious Dota player, you need to go somewhere else. And the simple reason is that we play with 180 ping, and 180 ping is just too high. Like, we get used to it, and then people see it as normal, and people are like, okay, well, whatever, it's 180, it's not that much. But the truth is that you're not going to make it pro that way. You need to be in a team where you can scrim. The most important thing to improving in anything in life, never mind Dota, is competing against people who are better than you. And if you're living in South Africa, you're not going to do that because there's like a small handful of strong teams. Once you're at the best, there's no one who's better than you that you're playing against. You're scrimming EU teams on 180 ping. Like, that doesn't help anyone. So what we've had actually this year is there's 3 different South Africans that have now moved to Southeast Asia. 2 of them are in Manila, one's in Cambodia. The one guy has just recently moved from Manila to Malaysia, where he's joined Team Flash. I don't know if you've heard of Team Flash.
Yeah, I mean, there are Chinese CS they have a Counter-Strike team. I think it's the same organization.
So we've got a South African who's just joined Team Flash's Dota team.
It's with Psionics, right?
Yes. So they're new 4-position players, South African.
Nice.
And then there's an off-laner and a mid-player from South Africa who haven't yet found teams, but are sort of around the region. So I think that's the way that we're going to distinguish ourselves. I think that the scene... The only other thing that might be helpful is if there was like a really big tournament that came to South Africa at some stage, and so South African teams could compete. Because in the past, all we've had, I think India's party had similar kind of exposure where they have like MSI beats it, so they have WESG one time a year that you have a team that gets to qualify and go there.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you're just not going to win a qualifier if you're competing on European servers with 200 ping.
Yeah. So the closest server for you guys is Europe.
Yeah.
Okay. That's horrible. I think
we have our own servers. They are South African servers. It's just like you don't have South African qualifiers, so it doesn't matter, right? You can play low pin, but you're not entering anything.
Did you feel South Africa should have its own qualifier?
No, I don't think the region's proven enough yet. This, like, hopefully, if a South African or a group of South Africans overseas and other teams could do well, maybe that would change things. But the fact is, you have to practice all the time to get better at Dota, right? And if you can't be based in a region where you're practicing again with that 180 ping. You need to be somewhere where you can practice on low ping.
Right. I mean, like, at least for us in India, we get good ping to Southeast Asia. I mean, we're constantly practicing in that region, and we've at least got that going for us. We got our own little health. We got our own ecosystem. Whatever it is, I don't know how much you know, but I think this year so far we've had 4.2 million USD in prize pool in just Indian tournaments. So we got our own healthy or unhealthy bubble that we work out of. But yeah, the good news is that we have a server and we have a region where we can try for qualifiers at the very least. But yeah, having to go to Europe to play qualifiers at 200 ping just sucks. And I think that also limits opportunities to scrim for you guys, right?
Yeah, that's what we were doing. We would scrim European teams because, like, scrimming the other South African teams wasn't worth it. Like, if you're the best, when you're not the best, maybe you want to convince the best team to scrim you. But once you become the best team, then like you're not learning anything by playing the other local teams. So you have to play European teams, and you learn things. And to be honest, we'd win stuff. Like, there's South African players. These guys I'm talking about who moved to Southeast Asia, who like got to rank 200 in Europe by playing on 200 ping, which to me is like crazy. That's really good, right? So we got some talents, and these are the people I was saying, like, you need to go somewhere if you want to take this seriously because you actually could make it. And it's only been a few months that they've been here, so I have some faith that some of those guys are going to distinguish themselves in the coming year.
May I ask, what are the ranks like in SEM?
The one guy last time I saw was about rank 50.
That's really good.
And then the other two were at about 300 and 600 respectively, I think.
Okay. Wow. I think another thing that I've been meaning to ask you or talk to you about is the DPC. It's changed. It's been a long year. You worked as an analyst. What has been your experience of the DPC season so far, and what do you think of the DPC season in 2018?
That's a big question. I mean, there's a lot that goes into the DPC system.
Okay.
I like that Valve introduced an automated system. I don't know if you've read the articles I've written. I've written a lot of articles in the past about Valve not having enough transparency and enough consistency and predictability in their system, not having rules established that people knew about how you get to international, how you get invited to events. And I like that Valve have been moving more and more in that direction of establishing it now. So the introduction of the DP system was nice because we've got the system where they don't suck out of their thumbs if they invite to international. There's rules for how you get there, you collect points, right? But the DPC system this year, in its first version, was still very experimental, and there was a lot that needed to be fixed. And I think based on what they've announced yesterday about the DPC system going forward, it looks like it's going to be better, but I think there's still going to be more room for improvements. The big change that I look at is the one where they're moving from players accruing points to teams accruing points. And I think that's good for the game in the long term, because I think that it's something that esports struggles to have, which sports has, which is fans who support teams rather than players. In Dota, fans kind of just support players, and if I like this player and he goes to another team, well, then I support that team now. There's not really that much consistency in the brands. But I think once you start centering things around the brand, around the team, around the organization, rather than the player, you get that consistency in the fan base, which is useful, I think, for the long-term life of the game. But at the same time, the risk is that what Valve have done historically is they've put in all of it on the player to protect the player from being exploited and mistreated by the organization. And now we're moving a little bit away from that. Valve are kind of forcing the issue where it's possible that organizations could exploit players. Players are going to have to make sure that they get representation, that they get managers, that they get agents. They make sure that they have a really, really good protective contract, because in the next season going forward, based on what they've announced about the DPC, you could help a team to win, I don't know, 8 lands, and then they just kick you, and you don't get to go to international even though you were there winning all those lands. So you need to make sure your contract gives you some kind of protection, some kind of like, they're going to have to give you a huge severance if they do that, for example.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned that the points are going to the teams and the brands. Do you think that's actually going to make us fans support brands more? Do you think that's actually going to help solidify a brand? Do you think there's more incentive now for brands to like just last longer because the DPC points are with them, so to say? Do you think I'm not sure how giving points to the brands will actually help solidify the image of a brand or help fans support brands more instead of the players.
No, the point is that the unit of measure team. The unit of measure is not the player, it's the team. So when we track points from the team, not from the player, which means that just the way that it shapes the narrative, just the way that it shapes how we discuss going forward, how things work, we're going to be talking about the teams all the time. Like, how many points does this team have, not how many points those players have. So it shapes the way the public narrative moves, and that means that people, if you are a team, are going to be, and you get points, they're talking about your team. And if you lose a player, they're still talking about your team because your team still has those points.
Okay. I think another thing that I wanted to just bring up very quickly is you've been in Manila before. You mentioned that you mentioned before we started this thing that you were living in Manila for a while. What do you think of SEA as a region for Dota 2? Do you think it has the potential to eventually compete with the big dogs in Europe and North America? And I think we're seeing glimmers of that, in particular with TNC, obviously Fnatic, since Envy's come in as well. What has changed for SEA, and what changed with TNC that they started finding this kind of success internationally?
I mean, TNC were just very, very gifted, had very good, I mean, I was probably like the world's top experts on TNC at the time. They started doing very well because I was a caster then, and I was just non-stop casting TNC versus MVP. This is like 2015 now, when they were playing Corsair Arena Cup every week, and like they were winning that all the time. And I think they were very, very talented players, and they had an identity. They had an absolute identity. They're the ones who created the like mid-Juggernaut, mid-Phantom Lancer, those kinds of things. They stuck together. They didn't have anyone who had like a massive ego. And one of the interesting things in the Philippines in particular, and a lot of people from the outside don't realize this, is that it's quite a religious society. The countries are very, like 95% Catholic. And TNC, I can tell you, for example, they actually pray together before every match they play. And like, I'm not a believer. It doesn't matter whether or not you believe in God if you're religious. The point is that they've got this thing that brings them all together, this unifying thing, which I think helps them a lot. It humbles them. No one gets to be bigger than the team. So you've got this strange combination of usually teams which are based on like raw talent end up with too much ego. But this is a team which has so much raw talent but doesn't have that ego. And I think that's what sets them ahead of a lot of the other teams here historically. But it's not just them. It's Fnatic, as you say. Mineski won a major this season, right?
Yeah.
Southeast Asia is a strong region. And the only thing it hasn't done yet is won an international. It's won a major. It's come top 4. It's come top 8 at internationals.
Yeah. I think Orange came top 4, right? No. Orange,
yeah, they got 3rd and Fnatic got 4th. Like, Southeast Asia's got top 4 twice at the international.
What's holding us back? I mean, what would you say is holding us back, like from winning TI? Do you think there's any step that we need to take really as a region?
I think that there was an experience advantage from the get-go, from as far back as Dota 1, early Dota 2, in terms of things like the big captains, the big names that you really talk about, like Puppy or Kuro, or they just do have an experience advantage over any of the leadership figures coming out on this side. Then there's the fact that there aren't a lot of leadership figures full stop coming out on this side. Culturally, it seems like that's one of the main contrasts. That's why we saw TNC originally getting Demon and then getting 1437 and a lot of Southeast Asian teams trying to invest in foreign players and foreign coaches because there's this perception, which I think is at least half true, that there's a lack of discipline and structure and rigidity in Southeast Asia. And that's something that's holding the scene back. I don't know if that tells the whole story though. And I think sometimes all you need is to convince yourself you can do it. I think I wouldn't be that surprised if come TI8 or TI9 or whatever, an SEA team wins, all of a sudden people just believe in SEA teams. Because that's how SEA kicked out in the first place. It was Shanghai Major, and all of a sudden MVP Phoenix were doing really well, TNC were doing really well, Fnatic were doing really well. And from that point, once the C team started placing, they kept placing. And it's been now, I think, 2 years of C teams quite consistently being respected as contenders for tournaments, even though, usually not expected to win those tournaments. Nobody laughs off TNC anymore. Nobody laughs off Fnatic. Nobody laughs off Mineski. They're really, really highly respected teams.
Yeah, I still remember, when TNC took a game of VP, we were all going mental here in the office. I can't remember the name of the event. It just, I think 2 events ago. This was that heavy Nature's Prophet side, the Nature's Prophet support meta, which Misery introduced and which you wrote about as well. Speaking of the meta, what do you think this patch is all about? Do you still think it's 2-1-2 to some extent? Or do you think that 2-1-2 isn't something that you have to stand by so hard anymore, as far as laning is concerned?
I think most teams certainly read it as being very hard 2-1-2 at the moment. But we do see some, adjustments. We see LGD like to help their mid laner, so that's a bit of a throwback to like older metagame. Some teams like to run the tri lane to punish the pressure dual lane. I think Dota is like, ever since Wings in 2016, Dota's been in a place where there's a lot more flexibility than people want to accept. There's a lot of different ways you can approach the game. And I think that most teams these days, what they're doing is figuring out what's best for them rather than what's best, period.
Okay. I think that's about it. I'm going to scroll through YouTube chat without my spectacles and try and catch any questions that the audience may have for Scanned. Give me a minute. Okay. We have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I think I already asked you this question. You did answer this question, but I think you can put it down in a little bit more detail. Some people don't understand the role of a coach in the right way, in the sense for them, a coach is only worthwhile if he or she is better than the entire team. However, these people don't understand the ideal role of a coach. Can you share a day in your life as a coach, as in what all do you do for your team? A day in your life, Scantzor.
A day in my life. Okay, so I wake up every morning. First thing I do is I go down to the gym. I do 5 km run. Something I encourage the players to do too. They do go to the gym a lot. They don't usually do it in the same routine as me, but I've been trying to add more structure and discipline in the team in general. I'll come back up, spend about half an hour sort of trying to reflect on what we did yesterday, what we need to focus on today, come up with some notes. Then we have a short meeting before our scrims for the day start, where we can talk about like what each player needs to focus on for the day. And then we have our first scrum. Obviously, a lot of my work is in drafting because I'm the one drafting in this team. So I'll be drafting for the scrims while the team is playing. I'll watch, again, take notes, try and think of the most important things for us to discuss after the game, because otherwise post-match discussion can often just like devolve into like petty squabbling. And so having that like organized structure to what we need to talk about when the game ends is very useful. Then after the first scrum, we usually eat. We have a short break. We play another scrum. We usually play 2 sets of scrums every day. And it's kind of repeats. It's kind of the same process. So I think what I said to you before, it's the strategy aspect, which is at the start of every game. It's the communication aspect, which is me watching the game and trying to really like note down ways in which we might be able to improve on our communication dynamic. And then it's just the overall like interpersonal and like adding structure to our lives, adding discipline. And for example, I'm very set on us getting to sleep earlier and waking up earlier, because usually scrims in Southeast Asia start at 2 p.m. But come qualifiers, the matches are going to start at 9 or 10 a.m. And if we go from waking up at 1 p.m. to like all of a sudden we have to wake up 4 hours earlier, no one's going to be as focused or as clear. So we need to, my view is that's the kind of thing we need to get in the habit of doing early on rather than at the last minute.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think, I mean, that's like an aspect of the day-to-day which actually impacts the game hugely. I mean, I know that a lot of teams in Southeast Asia sleep late, wake up late, so they can scrim in the afternoon after they've woken up and had something to eat. But yeah, TI quals are going to be starting earlier, and wow, they're even preparing for that.
And it affects, I mean, it might sound silly, but it affects things more than you'd realize. Swimming is very, very tiring. In fact, today we had one player who slept very badly last night. And today it was very noticeable. I mean, he caught himself out in his performance. He was like, I'm just struggling to concentrate today. I didn't sleep enough. So these normal, like healthy lifestyle kinds of things are relevant to your performance as a team. Absolutely. And so being able to help just to structure that is another thing that I can do.
Okay. What happens if we got questions just coming in? What happens if you and Noya have conflicting ideas about the meta or how the game should be played? I think it's not just about you and Noya. I think this is a broader question. Obviously, there's a very fine dance that the coach and the captain or the drafter usually have to do, and I'm sure you experienced this in the past where there could be conflict between you and how your team sees how the game should be played. How do you guys handle this?
I mean, I'd like to think I'm quite a reasonable person. I think I told you at the start of this discussion, I'm not the kind of coach who dictates. I'm also not the kind of drafter who dictates. I'm not going to be able to be calling the shots and calling the plays inside the game. And so I don't want to leave the team with a draft that they're not comfortable with. You know, they need to be receptive to the draft. And so if there's like a really strong disagreement about something, if they're not accepting of a pick that I'm suggesting, I'm not going to actually take that pick. So in that sense, I'm the drafter mostly in the sense that I'm taking the final responsibility, but it's a very interactive process. It's a very it's a negotiated process. I think that that would undermine the process if not for the fact that the players do respect and trust in the realism drafting. So it's not like there's this clash every other pick about like, no, I like this, no, you like that. So I think we've managed to find a sort of a negotiated middle point where, because I'm looking for their consensus on my picks anyway, that it's not likely that we get to this point. And usually when we do clash about a pick, it'll be after a game. Someone will say, I didn't really like that draft, I didn't really like that pick. And then we'll have our discussion and see if we agree or not and see how we'll go forward with that.
Okay. We got a question from someone we both know and from someone who's lost and won me a lot of party MMR. Sid Joshi, can you make Job come and wave at the camera? Can't I miss his face?
I can ask him to. Hey, Job. Sid asked if you can come wave at the camera.
Sid?
He's coming, Sid. There he is.
Sid, I hope you caught that.
I hope Sid saw it. Hope it wasn't for nothing. He made Job stand up.
He's even showing his muscles. Come on, Sid. Okay. We got another question. Do you think there should be more organizations like ACE in China? Is it better for esports? Do you think
ACE?
Do you think we need more regulatory bodies in esports? We got one of those in India. I don't know. Do you think these bodies help other countries, or do you think it's still too early?
I mean, yeah, we could use like esports is like super unregulated, and I think that is a problem. But I would never use ACE as an example of something that we want. So that's, I mean, the like ACE part, if we can just bracket that part, like. And my experience, honestly, and this is really the problem, like who would be the regulator? I don't know who I trust to do it. And this is why a lot of the time, I'm more of a, I don't know, I suppose maybe because I'm like socialist leaning politically, I'm kind of sympathetic to unions. I think that would be the first step. I think that if we were to form powerful regulatory bodies before unions, that we're going to really have misaligned incentives. So I'm all for the system being transparent first, which is something that Valve have been moving towards, and then for there being, player unions, player reps to like represent the interests of unions or places that players can go to get representation, and then we can talk about regulatory bodies. Because right now the players have like Dota. I don't know how many professional Dota players Professional Dota players are children. They don't know. Like if you like come to them with some like official looking, briefcase wielding, suit wearing lawyer person, they're gonna be terrified. They're not gonna know what to say to that person. They're not gonna know how to like hold their own and stand up for themselves. So definitely, I think that esports is far too unregulated. I think that people get screwed over a lot in esports. I can tell you myself personally, I've done more than one job in esports that I didn't get paid for.
Do you think talent and coaches need regulatory bodies or unions rather?
I mean, at very least, we need norms. Like, whether or not we have regulatory bodies to enforce those norms, we need norms. I mean, the courts in general, like normal courts could enforce those norms, but we need like what's starting to happen in the Western scene, but is still lagging behind in Southeast Asia. Definitely is like standard contracts for Dota players, and it's standardized. This is what it looks like. These are the terms. Buyout clauses. I mean, in Southeast Asia, to this day, some of the teams, Fnatic have had to pay buyouts for some players that they've recruited at this stage. But in the smaller teams in Southeast Asia, players just kind of like up and go. It's not. In South Africa, I had really I had some very bad experiences with. We did have there's like a government. I don't know if India has it, but in South Africa, there's a government body which has the power to award colors for esports. But
no, our body is. Never mind. I won't talk about our body, but no, they don't make choices like that.
But ours is terrible anyway. The point is, like, there's this opportunity. There was funding from the government for sports, but like it ended up being like a totally corrupt body, which is disconnected from how the games work. And that's the thing. That's the thing about forming regulatory bodies. You don't want it to be people with with like dodgy incentives. You don't want them to have vested interest, but you also don't want them to be people who are so disconnected that they don't know what's going on. And so finding people who are well positioned to actually be the regulators is probably the hardest part of all of it.
Yeah, I think we have a body, we have another body that may or may not happen. We had teams being chosen for the Asian Games. I don't know, we have our own tales to tell, but yeah, I think picking the right people is really important, and how those people are picked. I don't know who the right person would be for a regulatory body in India either. I think every country will probably have to think a bit before they pick themselves up a regulatory body like that. More questions. Would you like it if coaches are allowed to talk to players in the middle of the game, like Counter-Strike?
No, I think it would be very difficult to make beneficial use of it. I imagine there's ways that you can. I imagine there are ways that you can, but the truth is that, like what I was saying before, a big part of my job is to try and make the communication the players have with each other more efficient. Because talking to one another while playing Dota, I don't know if you're a Dota player yourself, but communicating with your teammates while playing Dota is a lot harder than communicating with them outside of the game. Right? And throwing in an extra voice to just like chirp in every now and then can just as easily throw people off as it can be valuable. Like I can talk, I mean, every coach can do this, right? When you're at home, when you're playing online qualifiers, every coach can speak during the draft, not during the draft, during the game, right? I could do that. I mean, I did it today, and I can tell you that from my own personal experience, it's not obvious that it's helpful. I think it can be helpful. I think that coaches would have to adapt and learn and be very, very good communicators themselves, to not say too much, to only say like very specific things at very specific times.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're saying like it's a double-edged sword, right? Right now, you run the risk of just complicating a game and giving information that could work against the team. And if you do find a way of making this happen, I think coaches will have to adapt. But would you want to see the game change in that sense, where the ability for a coach to talk is made possible? Do you want Dota to have that, or do you think it's okay without it? Has any coach ever asked for this? Like, have you? I mean, in this small dark room where all you coaches sit and play poker under a nice top light, have you ever asked that, guys, maybe we should be able to talk to each other? Maybe we should be able to talk to the players in the game.
I don't think so. That's just not where, at least not in the Western scene, where the culture is. Remember, the notion of coaching itself is very new. It's just a few years old in Dota.
Absolutely.
The notion of coaches drafting is also very new. It's less than 1 year old. And like this is something that, at least in the West, in the English-speaking world, it's taken a while for people to even accept, to give someone any kind of authority over them. So it's hard to even think of, to really conceive of for me. I guess my point is that in Dota, I feel like there's so much audio-visual traffic already. There's so much that you have to look at and listen to that's going on in the game. Communicating is hard. Trust me, players learn to not listen to things that are being said which aren't about or related to them, right? That's like, they have to create these filters in their minds that they like know what to focus on, what to listen to. And to add extra noise can be very, very disruptive. So you'd have to, at that stage, be a player that you'd have to be a coach that the players respected as a sixth player, because that's what it would be then. It would be essentially a sixth player.
Okay. I think we've also got one of the players from one of India's top 4 teams who's got a question for you in chat. How do you work with analyzing replays, and what do you do when you find a mistake or something like that? What do you do when you're looking at a replay with your team?
So the thing that we've been doing in this team a lot when it comes to replays is trying to work on like map movements, trying to work on like looking at us. Okay, the most obvious thing is that you remember in the game that you just played that there was like a big fight which was decisive at this stage or at the rush pit or something, and then you go back and look at that and you discuss that. Okay, that's an obvious thing to do. Another obvious thing to do that everyone does is looks through the lanes so that you can see what happened in the lanes that you weren't in, if you think there's something necessary to learn there. But the main thing that we've been trying to figure out is in terms of like the map movements in the mid game, in terms of where we should be playing on the map, which space on the map we should be playing, where we should be warding, if we should be protecting those wards. You'll hear, if you listen to the English commentators, you hear Blitz and Cap talking about shoving waves all the time, because it's so important, because depending on where the map is, that's where you can play or where you can't play, or what you can see and what you can't see. And so a lot of the time when we're analyzing a replay, what we're trying to see is like if the movement patterns are appropriate at certain times in the game, like where we should have been playing. If our support should have been playing around this core instead of the core that we were playing around, or around this side of the map instead of the side of the map that we were playing around.
Okay. I think there's a question. Have you seen coaches will be able to draft at an event like the international as well, right? Nothing's going to change there, right? It applies to any event. They can stand behind the players and draft even in TI, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, I'm just going to read the whole question out. At an event like the international, is a coach allowed to draft for the team on such a big stage? I've not seen the coach with the players in such situations. Abhishek Rane, it's happened at all majors and minors. At least teams that do have the coaches drafting for them, I've had them at all majors and minors. So I'm pretty sure that they'll be doing it at this TI as well. It's something that...
Yeah, you can. They definitely can. For
okay.
Sure.
If not, how would you and coaches like you draft tackle this? They wouldn't need to because you can. Fun question. Fun question, but yeah, it's just a small little tidbit about you. Which role do you think is the most difficult to play?
I would say that the most difficult role to play is whoever's the in-game shot caller, because they have two roles. They're playing Dota and they're also calling shots. And it's something that our team is actually struggling with, is figuring out who that should be.
Okay.
Otherwise, it depends on playing. It really depends on playing to your strengths. It's like there's that Einstein quote about like asking a fish to ride a bicycle or some. It's like
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm referencing.
Yeah.
Yeah. My bias would say that 5 positions to do the most with the least, but I don't know if that's necessarily true at all. Like, I think that every role is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a sort of difficult question to answer, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, but yeah, it's whoever has the added bonus of calling the shots that probably.
Yeah, that person's got way more pressure, and you, assuming your coach isn't drafting, whoever has to draft, like those things, drafting and shot calling, add like an immense pressure to just being a player. So if you're doing other things over and above being a player, I think that person's usually got a much harder role.
Okay. I think last couple of questions. Do you see the support staffs of teams growing in the future? Like, I don't know, like having a life coach, like having a data analyst, like having someone for nutrition. Firstly, do you think these sort of assets in a company help? And do you think we need more and more of these? Do you see more teams adapting life coaches or psychologists is working with them on their mental game?
Oh yeah, definitely. Every single team I've coached, I've felt like if there was a sports psychologist there, it would have helped a lot, because I have felt like there's sort of mental issues that I can identify, but I don't always feel equipped to like solve the issue myself. So I definitely think it's a matter of time. Like Dota gets the point that like big sports are at, esports gets the point that big sports are at, and teams are the kind of money to have big support staffs. They will have support staffs, because you're going to do everything you can to win. It's as simple as that. And these things matter a lot. Like psychology is a huge, confidence, psychology, mentality is a huge part of winning at Dota. Like if you come into a match and you're more confident to your opponents, you've got an edge for sure, like a big edge. And at the top level, confidence plays a huge role. And what impacts confidence? All different aspects of your psychology, all different aspects of the interpersonal dynamics, interpersonal psychology. So absolutely, like mental coach, sports psychologist, even maybe nutritionist, as you say, I have very little doubt. It's just a question of when, not a question of whether or not.
Okay. Okay. I'm hearing some murmurs of displeasure when you said nutritionist in your house, but okay.
No, we've got someone here who cooks for us, and I think the players are generally satisfied with the food.
Um,
And it's Indian food.
I
Yeah,
think
they love Indian food. That's what Job just said.
nice. By the way,
I actually love Indian food, to be honest. Indian food is like, I'm a vegetarian, and Indian food, like, you get a lot of good vegetarian options.
yeah, we have the most vegetarian options in the world, without a doubt. I think
Just give me some palak paneer any day of the week. I'll go. I could just never stop eating.
you are a man of culture, sir. Good choice. Good choice. I think you should come over for one of our lands. I think I hope Entity takes part and comes to one of these Indian lands. I remember Job was playing 1 year ago at the same land which is taking place this month. It was an earlier lineup, but yeah, hopefully this lineup comes as well. It's all up to Sid Joshi, that man. Whatever, it's up to him. We've got a question which I think I was thinking of earlier on when you mentioned TI9. How will the gaming Dota MOBA scene be in the future, and what are your predictions? Where do you see MOBA as a genre, or Dota even going in the future? Do you think it's going to last for another 5 years even?
Yeah, why shouldn't it? I mean, people always ask this question about, like, when is Dota gonna die? Like, why should it die? Can you name a modern esport that's died? The only example that anyone ever talks about is StarCraft, but StarCraft is like...
Quake.
It's the same thing. StarCraft and Quake are the games that created esports. They're like pre-esports, in my opinion. Like, esports comes after those games. Esports was built up by those games. And the esports that exist since then... The esports industry is so young. It's been around for, like, 7, 8 years. And the games in that industry, Dota, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Hearthstone, Overwatch now, none of those games have died. People like to talk about that because people have some expectation. Like, obviously, the games that existed before there was an industry to support them died, precisely because there was no industry to support them yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're at the point now where there's sufficient investment, sufficient interest that for a game like Dota to die, what it would take is gross negligence on the part of Valve. That's the only way that this game can die.
Okay. Do you think I mean, we did a podcast with Toby, which you folks can check in the channel, and one of the things that Toby mentioned is that Artifact, instead of adding to Dota's player base, might actually subtract and take away from it. Do you think that's a possibility? Do you think Artifact is going to help Dota, or do you think it might actually end up hurting it in any way?
It's not clear to me that it needs to do either. I know, for example, that the vast majority of people who play Hearthstone don't only play Hearthstone. And that's probably the best comparison as the genre of game. It's the kind of game that you play as your second game. It's the kind of game, like, obviously professional Hearthstone players mostly play Hearthstone. But League players play Hearthstone, Dota players play Hearthstone. In the same way, you could play Artifact if you're not a professional Artifact player. I think the casual players... Dota's actually the only one. As far as I know, I think Dota's the only popular esport that casual players stick to religiously. You know, that Dota players don't tend to overlap as much in other games, but like most games, people do overlap. Okay. So I think it will help Valve make money, and I'm excited for Artifact because I'm like a big Magic the Gathering player. I'm like a serious competitive Magic player.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, there's a rumor.
I can't imagine why it should hurt Dota.
Okay, there's a rumor you get it with a certain level on the Battle Pass, and I've heard that they're trying to launch it with TI8 in some way or form. Let's see.
I can't tell you they're already having tournaments. I don't know if you've heard that, but they're already having tournaments in Artifact.
Wait, are these matches being broadcast?
No, absolutely not. I'm just saying they're like...
Okay.
I mean, the game's still in alpha, but the people inside the alpha are having tournaments. I think they happen once a month or so.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think it's getting late, and the local cat in the studio is also gnawing away on my chair. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Scantzor. Any last shout outs from you?
Just shout out to everyone who supports Entity Gaming, and I hope that people are going to be cheering for us in open qualifiers because we're going to need that, that energy to form the Spirit Bomb. It's grueling. I'm not going to lie. It's right now the situation in Southeast Asia is kind of like you've got TNC and Fnatic and Mineski, and then behind them there's like 5 or 6 of us teams that like any of us could be next to 9.
Oh yeah,
and so it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think SE is the most cutthroat region, and any one of these 6, I'd say 8 teams can beat each other on any day. I mean, you can't predict an outcome. There's no favorite. And
Yeah. So really appreciate anyone who's cheering for us, because that does go a long way and it really can help. So shout out to whoever you are. I don't know. I mean, we haven't played any official matches since I've been here yet. We played Joint Dota League.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone watched that.
Yeah, I'm going to be casting some of those games soon enough as well. So, yeah. Yeah, you can...
But otherwise, yeah, thanks a lot for the interview.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us. You can catch NTT in the Joint Dota League in the Premier Division, as Division 1 is now referred to. My name is Veewake. You are watching an episode of Time Lapse. We do more of these and much more on our YouTube and Twitch channel. Do check it out. It's youtube.com/AFK Gaming Esports. Thank you for tuning in once again, and good evening and goodbye.